Beyond the velvet curtain. The chilling truth about the child stars you loved. Imagine the brightest smiles on television, the infectious laughter of children who defined the American dream. But what if the happiest places on earth were actually the darkest? Behind the multi-million-dollar merchandise and the roaring applause lies a horrifying, carefully guarded secret that Hollywood tycoons prayed you would never discover. This isn't just about lost innocence. It's about a systematic, ruthless machine that bought childhoods for pennies, wrung them dry for billions, and discarded the broken pieces into the shadows. We are pulling back the curtain on the chilling, blood-stained reality of the most beloved child idols in history. The entertainment elite covered their eyes, powdered over the bruises, and fed these little souls to the wolves of fame to protect their billion-dollar ratings. Prepare yourself, because the bedtime stories you grew up with are about to become your worst nightmares. You won't look at a classic sitcom the same way ever again. Patty Duke. Possessing a profound acting prowess far beyond her years, this young girl was once revered by the Academy as one of the most exceptional prodigies the history of cinema had ever produced. At just 16 years old, the whole world had to bow in respect when she got her hands on the prestigious Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Her soul-shaking transformation into the deafblind author Helen Keller in the cinematic masterpiece The Miracle Worker, 1962, propelled her name to the absolute pinnacle of artistic power. Immediately after, the television machine squeezed every drop of her magnetism by producing her own hit sitcom, Patty Duke, where she showcased her genius versatility by playing dual roles of identical cousins with entirely opposite personalities. On camera, she was the embodiment of a perfect America, a radiant smile, bright as, and a career paved with roses that any young girl would envy. However, the most chilling and ruthless dark side of Hollywood was exposed through the very people assigned to protect her. Her talent management team. From the tender age of 8, the little girl was separated from her family's arms and fell under the total control of 2 cunning managers, John and Ethel Ross. Their first cruel act was completely erasing her true identity. They forbade her from using her birth name, Anna Marie, stripping away her personal roots to mold her into a perfect money-making machine labeled Patty Duke. To force an adolescent body to function 15 hours a day under the crushing pressure of both film and television. These vicious managers systematically turned her into a chemical addict. They constantly stuffed her frail body with powerful uppers to keep her awake on set, then used high doses of downers to force her into brief slumbers between shooting shifts. The powerful directors and producers of Hollywood knew full well about this drug abuse when looking into her glassy eyes backstage. But they chose absolute silence because box office revenues continued pouring endlessly into their pockets. The final devastating blow arrived on the day she officially turned 18. As the burning desire to freely control her own life ignited, she was shocked to discover that the massive multi-million-dollar fortune she had shed blood and tears to earn had been pocketed and completely embezzled by the management duo. Losing all her money in her childhood, she was abandoned with a drug-dependent body and an incredibly severe case of bipolar disorder, triggered by years of inhumane chemical abuse. The entertainment system's brutal crushing pushed her into days of life and death struggles with psychological darkness, fleeting broken marriages, and erratic behavior in the media. It took decades later, using extraordinary willpower, extraordinary, for her to finally reclaim control to become a courageous voice advocating for mental health. Patty Duke's passing in 2016 closed a tragic yet heroic story, leaving behind a permanent, indelible indictment against an industry willing to steal souls and brainwash children just to serve its superficial vanity. Gary Coleman, with his height permanently frozen at 4 feet 8 inches due to a congenital kidney disease, his ageless, chubby face, and the classic catchphrase, "What you talkin' 'bout, Willis?" Gary Coleman became the soul of an entire era of American television. Throughout the 8 seasons of the legendary sitcom Different Strokes, which premiered in 1978, his character Arnold Jackson was not only a laugh-generating machine, but also a cultural bridge, propelling him onto the list of the most powerful child stars on the planet. With a salary of up to $100,000 per episode, magazine covers constantly him as Hollywood's little miracle. But the dark reality behind the halo was a brutal exploitation of labor that entirely disregarded a child's severe physical defects. Gary was born with autoimmune nephritis, forcing him to undergo painful kidney transplants and regular dialysis, even when he was just an elementary schoolboy. Instead of being allowed to rest and recover, producers and the management team forced him to work 14 hours a day under the harsh stage lights, ignoring his extreme exhaustion just to ensure the broadcast schedule wasn't interrupted for even a single day. Even more disgustingly, the Hollywood entertainment machine deliberately exploited Gary's stunted physical growth to imprison him in the body of a child forever, aiming to maintain the commercial appeal of the eternal Arnold character. The final devastating blow arrived on the day Gary reached adulthood, when he was shocked to discover that his entire massive fortune of over $18 million had completely siphoned off contracts and phantom management fees. From a renowned child millionaire, Gary was pushed onto the streets empty-handed, carrying a diseased body and a soul filled with resentment over the betrayal by the only people he had ever trusted. The actor, who was once loved by all of America, now had to suffer the humiliation of working as a parking lot security guard to pay medical bills, constantly mocked by the media and scrutinized by the public over his downfall. In 2010, Gary passed away due to brain trauma complications following a fall at his home and closing a life that Hollywood had wrung dry to the last drop of blood, only to abandon him to die in poverty and public mockery. Carl Switzer. Although the original footage was shot in the 1930s, the intense vitality of the short comedy series Our Gang, also known as The Little Rascals, continued to dominate the airwaves, becoming an indispensable part of the soul of 1950s and 60s childhoods. The heart of that entire great comedic machine was Carl Switzer, the boy who phenomenally embodied Alfalfa, an eternally iconic character with his slicked-down hair and standing cowlick, a freckle-filled face, and incredibly charming, intentionally off-key singing performances. Carl's innate wit turned the character of Alfalfa into a massive pop culture phenomenon, helping studio moguls rake in endless waterfalls of dollars through countless global syndications and reruns. However, of millions of viewers lay one of the most blatant exploitations in the entire history of the American movie, Capital. Hollywood's horrifying dark side was exposed through cunning contracts that forced child actors to sell off their labor for a meager, fixed weekly salary. The cruelty reached its peak when the studios absolutely refused to pay a single cent in residuals to Carl, despite his image being continuously broadcasted on television for decades, generating relentless profits. While white executives lived in lavish mansions thanks to Alfalfa's goofiness, the very person who created that soul grew up surrounded by poverty. The fierce elimination process of the entertainment industry repeated itself once again. As soon as Carl went through teenage years, his voice cracking and no longer retaining his goofy, adorable charm, Hollywood instantly treated him like trash. No one wanted to hire the famous former child star for movies. Imprisoned in his own brilliant past, he had to struggle, taking on the most grueling manual labor jobs just to make ends meet, from bartending at cheap dives to working as a hunting guide for tourists. The bitterness of a comedy genius forgotten by society and robbed of his intellectual property by capitalists turned Carl into a hot-tempered man, carrying immense resentment toward life. The tragic trajectory took a steep nosedive, ending in an incredibly catastrophic incident on a January evening in 1959. During a blind, out-of-control argument over a petty debt of a mere $50 for training a hunting dog, the renowned former actor was fatally shot by his opponent right on the spot. The boy who once had all of America roaring with laughter collapsed in a cold pool of blood at just 31 years old, ending a humiliating series of days struggling to survive. The rule demonstrating the media's chilling ungratefulness was that his death was almost entirely ignored by major newspapers simply because it coincidentally happened on the same day as the passing of powerful director Cecil B. DeMille. Hollywood chose to ignore the corpse of the child artist who had once fed their system, burying the tragic fate of Carl Switzer into the darkest, most hidden corner of oblivion. His life is a bleeding testament that this industry has absolutely no heart. They are ready to buy your innocence for pennies, wring it dry to the very end, and coldly shrug their shoulders when you collapse because of their very own betrayal. Bobby Driscoll. If you ever immersed yourselves in the magic world of Disney in the 1950s, the name Bobby Driscoll was the greatest embodiment of that magic. This bright-eyed boy entered human artistic legend by breathing life into, voicing, and serving as the live-action reference model for Peter Pan, classic masterpiece of the same name released in 1953. Prior to that, this acting prodigy had shaken the Academy, being honored with a special juvenile Oscar for his outstanding performances in the blockbusters The Window and Song of the South. Bobby was the very first Golden Boy to be personally signed to a long-term exclusive contract by Walt Disney himself, on unprecedented privilege, promising a future paved with brilliant glory. However, the horrifying and utterly cruel dark side of this fairy tale kingdom instantly revealed itself when the harsh law of nature knocked on the door. Bobby hit puberty. The once angelic boy's voice began to crack, and his face broke out in severe teenage acne. A completely normal human occurrence, but a crime against the studio's flawless aesthetic standards. Immediately, the management machine ruthlessly canceled his contract, tossing him out on the street without a word of goodbye, and banned him from setting foot on the very swaited to build his fame. This betrayal by his spiritual father dealt a devastating psychological blow to a teenager, equipped with no life skills other than acting, unable to attend public schools due to brutal bullying over his has-been star status. Bobby spiraled into a downfall, turning to hard drugs to soothe the pain of abandonment. The trajectory of his life slid into the darkness of poverty and criminal convictions, turning the Prince of Neverland into a wandering shadow on the crime-ridden streets of New York. In early 1968, his cult was discovered by children playing inside a derelict, abandoned building in the East Village. Tragically, due to a lack of any identification, the body of the former superstar who once brought millions of dollars to Disney was hastily buried by authorities in an unmarked grave on Hart Island, a potter's field for the destitute and homeless. It wasn't until over a year later, when his exhausted mother searched for her son using fingerprint records, that the world shockingly realized the tragic end of the boy who could fly. The downfall of Bobby Driscoll is a blood-stained indictment. The one who gave children worldwide the dream of never growing up had his own dreams ruthlessly murdered by adults simply because he made the mistake of growing up. Danny Bonaduce. Entering the vibrantly colorful 1970s, American pop culture was swept up in a frantic musical whirlwind called the Partridge Family. The red-haired boy, with a face full of freckles and razor-sharp sarcastic lines, Danny Partridge, embodied by Danny Bonaduce, quickly became the soul of this entire musical television program. The image of the mischievous young bass player, who always brought laughter to a family of traveling musicians, created a global phenomenon, pushing soundtrack album sales and TV ratings to unprecedented record highs. Millions of teenagers plastered his posters on their walls, believing he was living a regal life, loved and protected by the most wonderful co-stars in the capital of lights. However, behind the catchy pop melodies and the radiant smiles before millions of viewers lay a horrifying dark shadow of abuse that the Hollywood system itself ruthlessly covered up. His biological father, Joseph Bonaduce, was a powerful television writer and producer with deep connections within the entertainment industry's elite. Under that seemingly prestigious roof, Danny constantly had to endure incredibly brutal physical abuse, being beaten half to death even when he was just a little boy. The most terrifying dark side of the production machine didn't lie in apathy, but in intentional complicity. Many adult actors on set, including his on-screen mother, Shirley Jones, knew perfectly well the chilling truth about Danny's physical injuries. Yet, because his father's influence was too great, and because no one wanted to interrupt the network's billion-dollar money-making machine, not a single abuse report was filed, and not a single investigation was launched. The Hollywood elite placed revenue and power dynamics above the bare minimum safety of a child actor, turning the film set into a sanctuary that enabled violence. When the Partridge Family abruptly ended in 1974, the illusion shattered, leaving a 15-year-old boy stripped of all his glory and plunged into a state of utter helplessness. Losing the protective shell of fame, Danny completely lost his direction. Lacking life skills and without a real family to rely on, he was kicked to the curb by the very industry that had once exploited him. The most tragic shock was the image of a former teen idol who once made millions of girls cry. Now, and having to scrape by and sleep rough right inside his own beat-up car behind a Hollywood restaurant's dumpster, he turned to illicit stimulants as the only escape to numb the horrifying memories of the beatings and the cold shoulder of the media machine. The deeply scarred survival story of Danny Bonaduce lays bare a spine-chilling truth. In Hollywood, if your abuser is someone with the power to generate profit, then the desperate screams of a child for help are just background noise that must be filtered out to protect the ratings. Dana Plato. Co-starring in the smash hit Different Strokes, Dana Plato was dubbed the beautiful blonde princess, the embodiment of the pure and vibrant beauty of American teenagers in the 1980s. Her role as Kimberly Drummond became an idol for millions of young girls, bringing cascades of profits to the NBC network and helping her step into the ranks of the West Coast film industry's most promising faces. However, Hollywood's cruel dark side revealed its true colors as soon as Dana had an unplanned pregnancy in 1984, while the show was still at the peak of its success. Instead of supporting the young artist during her most vulnerable period, the studios immediately issued a harsh embargo, firing her on the spot because they believed the image of a mother would destroy the fake purity they were selling to the audience for profit. This callous abandonment not only ended a career at its most brilliant peak, but also dealt a fatal blow to the self-esteem of a young girl, not yet 20 years old, who was in desperate need of protection. Completely boycotted by the entertainment industry and unable to find work in any mainstream projects, Dana was pushed into a vortex of despair. She was forced to accept roles in cheap B-movies and even pose for adult magazines just to earn money to buy milk for her child. The cruelty of Hollywood's prejudices turned a child angel into a sinner in the eyes of the public, causing her to spiral down the path of substance abuse to escape the humiliation and absolute ostracization of society. In 1991, all of America was shocked to see the once beautiful Kimberly arrested by police for robbing a video store with a toy gun in her hand. A desperate act stemming from the sheer destitution of someone who had been stripped of everything. The pinnacle of the tragedy occurred over Mother's Day weekend in 1999, when Dana ended her own life with a massive drug overdose inside rundown RV, the final refuge of a starlet discarded by the system. Her passings at the age of 34 is a blood-soaked testament that Hollywood is ready to build up angels to be worshipped, but they will also be the very first to cast stones at that angel when they can no longer contain the illusory perfection the system requires for its business. Jay North. Turning back the wheel of time to the brilliant era of early 60s television, a blonde boy with a mischievous smile captured the hearts of tens of millions of American households. That boy was Jay North, who perfectly brought the legendary comic strip character Dennis Mitchell to life in the classic family sitcom Dennis the Menace, premiered in 1959. With his signature overalls, a slingshot always hidden in his pocket, and harmless yet incredibly adorable antics, Jay became the absolute embodiment of an innocent, carefree American childhood. The public's fervor for him was so immense that Dennis's image heavily plastered cereal boxes and toys, raking in mountains of massive royalties for the CBS network. However, the glamorous velvet curtain of the studios concealed one of the most cruel and terrifying living hells that a child under 10 ever had to endure. Hollywood's horrifying dark side was exposed in its silent and inhumane complicity in this crime. To maintain a grueling filming schedule, executives handed total control of the boy over to an incredibly draconian aunt and guardian. Instead of warm hugs, Jay's real childhood consisted of ruthless beatings, vicious verbal abuse, and a suffocating regime of physical control right inside his dressing room. The boy was not allowed to eat his favorite foods and was strictly forbidden from interacting or playing with other child actors on set to ensure absolute concentration like an acting machine. The top brass of the studio, from directors to makeup artists, were fully aware of this chilling truth. Countless times they had to apply thick foul layers of bruises and the yet-to-dry tear tracks on the boy's cheeks before yelling, "Action!" But for cinema capitalists, profit was always placed above humanity. As long as ratings hit their peak and the boy smiled perfectly for the camera, they were ready to cover their eyes and plug their ears to his silent cries. The 4-year-long nightmare completely destroyed the fragile psychological structure of a child, turning him into a prisoner of his own fame. When the show ended and he entered his teenage years, the ungrateful entertainment industry instantly delivered its coup de grace. Deeming him typecast as Dennis, studios simultaneously turned their backs, tossing him out of the system without any psychological rehabilitation support. Floundering and suffering from incredibly severe post-traumatic stress disorder, the young man was forced to flee the movie capital by enlisting in the Navy, hoping the military could wash away the scars inflicted by Hollywood. Although he luckily survived and later became a staunch advocate fighting for child actors' rights, the deep wounds from those years of torment under the lights remain a part of a childhood forever lost and unrecoverable. Anissa Jones. Throughout the latter half of the 1960s, no American family could resist the sweet, melt-your-heart adorable charm of little Anissa Jones on the small screen. She became a massive cultural phenomenon, an icon deeply ingrained in the audience's subconscious through her role as Buffy Davis, the orphan girl clutching her Mrs. Beasley doll in the smash hit family sitcom Family Affair, which premiered in 1966. The innocent image of Buffy sparked an insane merchandising frenzy. Millions of dolls, lunchboxes, and clothing items bear her likeness sold out completely, stuffing the pockets of capitalist investors. However, behind that iconic success was an incredibly sophisticated process of physical exploitation and psychological abuse orchestrated by the television network itself. Contrary to the natural biological rhythm, producers demanded that the character Buffy remain a naive 6-year-old girl forever, regardless of the fact that the real-life Anissa was growing up day by day over the show's 5-year broadcast run. The most horrifying and twisted dark side of Hollywood revealed itself when the little girl's body began developing the feminine traits of adolescence. Instead of adjusting the script, the wardrobe team ruthlessly used layers of fabric bandages to tightly bind Anissa's chest, forcing her to wear cramped toddler dresses to maintain the illusion of a preschooler on camera. This forced suppression of her physical maturation created a deep psychological wound, causing the young girl to develop an extreme hatred for the very character that had made her famous. When the series finally brought down its curtain, the former child star was completely trapped in the typecasting of casting directors. No one wanted to give a mature role to the nation's doll-clutching little girl. Her desire to live as a normal teenage girl crushed, she dropped out of school, frequently ran away from home, and plunged into aimless rebellion to shake off her fake, innocent image. Right on her 18th birthday, when she officially inherited the massive accumulated earnings from her years of acting, the ultimate tragedy struck. Just months after reaching adulthood, her body was found in a bedroom in the town of Oceanside, California. The coroner's conclusion sent a horrifying shockwave through the global public. America's little TV sweetheart had died from a massive mixed drug overdose, recorded as one of the worst cases of that era. The death of Anissa Jones at 18 is a chilling wake-up call about the cost of greed. Television tycoons wrung out her childhood to sell toys, only to toss her into a brutal reality where she never had the chance to learn how to survive. Rusty Hamer. However, the grim dark side that entertainment tycoon swept under the rug behind the studio lights was a brutal slaughterhouse for the soul, where his childhood was legally bought and sold. From the age of 6, instead of going to school to learn, playing on a baseball field, or experiencing the normal thrills of growing up, his entire world was framed within the suffocating walls of a soundstage. Rusty's childhood was, in reality, a grueling series of exhausting workdays, laboring at the intensity of an adult to serve the network's massive money-making machine. Hollywood's most bitter betrayal became clear when the show officially ended its run in 1964, just as he turned 17. The most turbulent age of a person's life. As soon as he lost the innocent, adorable traits of a preschooler, casting directors immediately and callously turned their backs, slamming shut every door to the former child star's future. They handed him a professional death sentence. He had been typecast, forever just the shadow of little Rusty Williams in the audience's mind, and no studio wanted to risk giving him a serious young adult role. Tossed out into the real world without being equipped with any basic educational foundation or survival skills. Other than acting, the young man fell into a state of utter panic and despair. From a red carpet superstar, he was forced to swallow pride and wear a hat as a fry cook flipping burgers at fast food joints, work as a delivery boy, and take on the most grueling manual labor jobs just to avoid starving. The cold indifference of the movie capital towards someone who had once brought them tens of millions of dollars pushed the former actor's mental health into an inescapable pit of depression. Every effort to return to the screen was met with mockery and rejection, causing the agonizing pain and sense of worthlessness to gradually eat away at his final will to live. In early 1990, unable to continue enduring the torment of his glorious memories, clashing with his destitute reality, the 42-year-old man decided to bring down the final curtain on his own life in the most extreme and tragic manner at his home. The shocking end of Rusty Hamer tore off the entertainment industry's humanitarian mask, exposing a chilling truth. Hollywood loves children, but it will ruthlessly crush them the moment they grow up and are no longer useful. Tommy Rettig. Throughout the golden years of the 1950s and extending right into the 60s, millions of American families had an unbreakable weekend night routine. Gathering around the black and white TV screen to watch a symbol of purity. At the center of that attention was Tommy Rettig, a boy with clear eyes and a gentle smile, who had the honor of taking on the classic role of Jeff Miller in the television masterpiece about the legendary collie named Lassie, which premiered in 1954. The obedient, brave farm boy, always standing side by side with his four-legged friend, etched himself into the public's mind as the perfect standard of the American dream, helping the series reap a slew of prestigious Emmy Awards. Thanks to Tom's magnetism, the television machine printed massive profits, promoting an image of a peaceful, warm country without a single blemish. However, the cruel and suffocating dark side of Hollywood's elite, hidden behind those poetic country scenes, was an inhumane labor schedule brought down upon a child. Young Tommy had no normal childhood. He was locked into slave-like contracts, forced to work continuously under blazing hot studio lights, and stripped of his right to play and make friends with peers his own age. After 4 grueling years, of giving his all to the point of exhaustion, the desire to live like a normal teenager drove him to beg producers to release him from the hit series. However, his effort to shed his past inadvertently opened the door to a more vicious tragedy, created by the very narrow-mindedness of the film industry: the curse of being typecast. Even though he entered adulthood with sharply honed acting skills, directors and casting executives resolutely turned their backs, refusing to give Tommy any young adult roles with depth. In the eyes of Hollywood's elite, he was permanently labeled as just Lassie's boy. His career completely froze because the entertainment system did not allow America's childhood icon to grow up on screen. The resentment of having his talent buried, coupled with his disorientation upon stepping out into the real world, pushed the former child star into a terrifying pit of despair. Trying to soothe the psychological trauma of being bled dry and rejected by Hollywood, Tommy spiraled into the abuse of illegal drugs, dragging along countless legal troubles that completely destroyed his reputation. His meager remaining fortune evaporated entirely through court cases, pushing the young man who was once the pride of millions of families into bankruptcy and ultimate destitution. Although in his final years he tried to start over as a computer software programmer, the mental scars from his childhood never truly healed. In 1996, Tommy Rettig passed away from heart failure at the age of 54. His life is a damning indictment. Hollywood used his childhood to build a billion-dollar empire, only to leave him to sink or swim in the mud when the mask of innocence fell away. Butch Patrick. In the memories of children growing up in the 60s, the image of the adorable little werewolf boy with slicked-back black hair and a small teddy bear in his hand became an immortal icon. That was Eddie Munster, the character that made Butch Patrick's name in the classic horror comedy series The Munsters, 1964. Eddie was not just a role. The boy was the embodiment of accepted differences, bringing laughter and warmth to millions of American homes through stories of a monster family living in the human world. The show's resounding success turned Butch into one of the highest-paid child stars of the time, appearing on countless toy products and in massive promotional parades. However, Hollywood's cruel and despicable dark side hidden beneath that elaborate makeup was the physical and soulful draining of a child in the name of art. Every day, Butch had to wake up at 4 in the morning, sitting motionless for over 3 hours as makeup artists applied heavy layers of adhesive glue and silicone to his face, causing severe allergic reactions to his tender skin. Studio executives completely ignored the boy's burning pain and agonizing itchiness. They only cared about keeping the makeup intact to save filming time and budget. Even more terror when the series was abruptly canceled after 2 successful seasons. The entertainment machine instantly executed a brutal brainwashing process. They branded him with a permanent career curse. Because the image of Eddie Munster was so powerful, producers assumed Butch was an actor incapable of playing any other normal human roles, turning him into a blacklisted outcast right in the capital of lights. The brutal price of being locked in a monster's skin by Hollywood was a youth submerged in an identity crisis, and the cold shoulder from the entire casting industry. To combat the feeling of being discarded, Butch sought fake salvation from addictive substances, spending decades wrestling with the darkness of mental breakdowns and mounting debt. His brilliant childhood career was crushed by Hollywood, turning a talented boy into a victim of the media elite's greed and selfishness. Lauren Chapin. Throughout the golden era of 1950s television, no single show defined the concept of the brilliant and complete, perfect American home, quite like the legendary family series Father Knows Best. The center of attention, the tears, and the smiles of millions of viewers were all focused on the youngest daughter, Kathy Anderson, with her incredibly adorable nickname, Kitten, played by child actress Lauren Chapin. On screen, the little girl lived in a sun-drenched home, protected by an exemplary father who always had wise advice ready to solve even the smallest childhood troubles. That fake warmth lulled all of America to sleep, bringing in lucrative advertised contracts and massive profits for sponsors and studio executives alike. However, the most disgusting and horrifying dark side of Hollywood lay in the brutally callous apathy of a massive production system toward the ultimate agony of a child. As soon as the director yelled, "Cut!" Lauren had to drag her feet back to a literal living hell, where she was the victim of extremely brutal domestic violence from her own biological father and psychological abuse from her mother. The most condemnable part is that the executives, makeup artists, and the set crew were fully aware of this blood-soaked truth. They saw with their own eyes the deep bruises on the little girl's frail arms and face every morning she arrived on set. Instead of calling the police or intervening to rescue an innocent life, the morals of the movie capital were bought off by money. They chose to use thick layers of powder to cover ups, forcing up the crimes, forcing the little girl to smile, to protect the illusion of an ideal family on national broadcast. That complicit silence turned Hollywood into an accomplice, imprisoning Lauren in an unbearable psychological torment between the glittering lights and the whippings in the dark. When the show officially ended, the familiar rule of squeezing the juice and tossing the rind was instantly activated. No longer the innocent youngest daughter, Lauren was given the cold shoulder by directors, unable to find any other acting job. Tragedy followed tragedy when she discovered that the entire fortune she had painstakingly earned over 6 squandered and completely embezzled by her own biological mother. Left empty-handed, carrying a shattered and heavily scarred soul, the former child star spiraled into addiction to escape reality, spending her dark youthful years in juvenile detention centers and even prison. The free-falling trajectory of Lauren Chapin is a heart-wrenching indictment. The entertainment industry is ready to sell you a dream about the greatest father, while turning a blind eye to the fact that the very child creating that dream is being suffocated by her own family. Trent Lehman. In the 1970s, American screens were once again captivated by a blonde boy with a bright smile and eyes sparkling with mischief. That was Trent Lehman, a child star who burned brilliantly and left a profound mark on the memory of a generation through his role as Butch Everett in the famous family sitcom Nanny and the Professor. The smart, witty character of Little Butch became the soul of the show, helping the series reap massive commercial success and putting Trent's name on the covers of the most prestigious teen magazines. Under the blinding spotlight, he enjoyed privileges that any child would dream of. Pockets full of money, fans swarming him for autographs, and absolute pampering from the show's producers. However, the abyss of cruelty opened its jaws, waiting for the boy as soon as the series was suddenly canceled by the network after just 3 short seasons. The ruthless wheel of fame squeezed out his value and then tossed him aside like trash. Falling from the peak of attention, Trent faced a completely frozen reality as acting offers dwindled and then vanished without a trace. When puberty knocked, changing his physique and voice, the movie capital deemed him past his expiration date, stripping away the actor title he had used to define himself since childhood. Forced to return to a normal public school, the former child star had to face a horrifying form of mental abuse from his very own peers. Instead of being welcomed, he became the target of vicious teasing, isolation, and cruel, scrutinizing glares from those who were always envious of his brilliant past on television. Social alienation, combined with the massive shock of discovering that the entire fortune he had worked so hard to earn in his childhood had evaporated due to his family's poor management, caused the young man to lose his direction entirely. Penniless, with no career, no love, and a stolen identity, Trent spiraled into legal troubles, culminating in petty theft charges driven purely by absolute destitution and disorientation. The shattered heart of a child used and then abandoned by the adult world had exceeded the breaking point for a young man just beginning to step into adulthood. In January 1982, a heartbreaking tragedy occurred, shaking everyone who had once loved the radiant blonde boy. At the age of 20, the most beautiful prime of youth, Trent Lehman went to Vina Avenue Elementary School in the Los Angeles area, the very school that held his last rare, peaceful memories. There, right outside the cold iron fence of the schoolyard, the young man made the most agonizing decision to end his tragic days, freeing himself from a life suffocated by public opinion and the film industry. This sorrowful event is an indelible scar in television history, blood-stained proof that Hollywood's temporary adulation is a deadly poison that destroys the entire future of innocent youth. Bridget Anderson. Entering the 1980s, the American silver screen found a new angel with golden blonde hair and large, round eyes filled with incredible intelligence. Bridget Anderson became a global phenomenon with her outstanding portrayal of the title role in the widely beloved film Savannah Smiles. 1982. The kind-hearted character of Savannah warmed millions of souls, turning Bridget into an A-list child star and the highly sought-after target of glossy children's magazines. Critics once praised her as an innate genius, possessing an expressive ability and emotional depth that even the most veteran actors had to admire. However, the most horrifying dark side of the movie capital was that they opened the door for wolves in human clothing to access these little souls without any protection whatsoever. Right at the glittering parties of Hollywood's elite, Bridget, who was just an elementary school girl at the time, was thrust into an environment rampant with moral decay and hard, illicit substances. Producers and management teams, instead of protecting her, viewed a child's exposure to this botched life experience, completely ignoring her, slowly shattering mental health. When her career began to show signs of stalling due to physical changes during puberty, Hollywood ruthlessly labeled her an obsolete commodity. The entertainment industry's callous abandonment, combined with the psychological trauma from early exposure to the dark side of fame, pushed the young girl into a free-falling spiral with no end in sight. She strove to find peace, but was constantly haunted by her brilliant childhood glory and the freezing reality of being left empty-handed. The pinnacle of the tragedy occurred on a summer day in 1997, when all of America was shocked to hear that the former little angel had passed away permanently at the age of 21 due to a massive drug overdose. The agonizingly premature death of Bridget Anderson is a damning indictment exposing Hollywood's irresponsibility and cruelty. They are ready to feed children a diet of lies, only to stand by and watch them wither away in solitude the moment the stage lights fade.